The most valuable company on Earth almost went bankrupt over a massive gamble that absolutely nobody believed in, and the man who made that bet is now literally shaping the future of AI. Welcome to NextGen AI Tech. This submitted analytical manuscript explores NVIDIA's historic evolution from a gaming graphics company into the foundational architect of the global AI infrastructure. We're skipping the fluff today because the writer obviously has deep technical expertise, so let's get right into the first major area for improvement. Where do we start?
The narrative leaps abruptly from the historical gamble of the 2006 CUDA architecture to the modern intricacies of physical AI without establishing the evolutionary through-line. I mean, the draft treats the 2006 CUDA rollout and the current push into open physical AI as completely isolated case studies, which is a major weakness.
Yeah, it reads like two completely separate history chapters.
Exactly. The author details how the company accepted these severe margin hits, right? Just watching its market cap crash from, $8 billion down to $1.5 billion, all to build an installed base on $500 gaming GPUs.
Which, for anyone needing a quick refresher, that was the CUDA bet. They forced parallel computing, where a GPU does thousands of smaller tasks all at once instead of sequential, one-at-a-time CPU tasks, onto every consumer card, even though gamers, they really didn't want to pay for it.
Right, they absolutely didn't. But then the text just jumps 20 years into the future to discuss the current robotics strategy without showing how these two eras are actually the exact same strategy repeating itself. This disjointed structure misses the opportunity to show the reader that a highly specific, repeatable corporate playbook is at work here.
So the suggestion is to restructure the transition?
Yes. Restructure the transition to explicitly connect that 2006 consumer GPU strategy to the 2026 open model strategy. The revision must demonstrate how subsidizing a software platform to build a developer ecosystem is actually their core architectural moat.
Got it. Do you have a concrete example of where they should do this in the text?
Sure, so they should introduce a dedicated bridging paragraph immediately following the 2012 AlexNet Big Bang section. The writer needs to show how putting CUDA on every GeForce GTX 580 seeded the deep learning revolution, and then explicitly mirror that with the 2026 launch of the Cosmos 3 open foundational models.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, detail how releasing Cosmos 3 Nano and Super for free to the Cosmos Coalition partners like Agile Robots and Skilled AI is the modern equivalent of that CUDA bet.
Because they're giving away the world's simulation tools for free to democratize physical AI?
Exactly. Which forces the entire robotics ecosystem to standardize on their underlying hardware.
So instead of viewing this as a tech line, the writer should frame it conceptually like a razor and blades model? Except in 2006, the Razor was a subsidized gaming GPU to sell the blade of parallel computing, and today, the Razor is free open-source Cosmos software to sell the blade of huge Blackwell and Vera Rubin server racks.
I mean, a razor and blade analogy is okay, but it implies a simple one-to-one transaction. The dynamic we're talking about is more about creating an ecosystem gravity well. It's a developer flywheel.
Ah, a flywheel. Right.
Yeah, so keeping the structural flow tight, the writer needs to ensure that the connection between the 2006 software lock-in and the 2026 physical AI lock-in is fully established.
That makes a lot of sense. And, before we move to the next section of the critique, I want to ask everyone listening. That 2006 decision almost killed the company. Is that kind of bet the company decision-making genius, foresight? Or is it just reckless risk-taking that happened to work out? Let us know down in the comments.
I'd love to read those comments, actually.
Same. Okay, let's transition to the infrastructure side of the manuscript. The text shifts focus to the theoretical framework of the 5-layer AI cake, and this massive shift from retrieval-based computing to generative computing. But the explanation feels a bit, untethered.
The conceptual framing of computing shifting from a retrieval-based model to a generative model is profound, but it currently lacks grounded operational contrasts to anchor the reader's understanding.
It definitely reads a bit like a white paper glossary right now.
It really does. The weakness is that the author relies way too heavily on abstract architectural terms, things like mixture of transformers, deterministic data flow, and agentic harnesses.
Which, sure, an expert reader grasps the vocabulary.
Right, but the actual economic and physical impact of this shift is totally blunted. The text fails to contrast the new model with the old model in practical terms.
So how do we fix that? What's the suggestion?
Ground the retrieval versus generative paradigm shift by aggressively contrasting the economic model of a legacy data center with the real-time manufacturing metrics of a modern AI factory.
Okay, I like the sound of an AI factory. Concrete examples for the writer?
Instead of just listing the 5 layers, energy, chips, infrastructure, models, applications, rewrite that section to directly compare a 2010 traditional data center to a 2026 Blackwell-powered AI factory. Explain that the old data center was a cost center. It just stored and served pre-recorded files like PDFs or videos.
Right, retrieval. You click a link, it retrieves a file.
Exactly. Contrast that with the AI factory as a revenue-generating manufacturing plant that takes raw energy and converts it into thinking tokens. The writer should use the specific metrics already in their text. Explain how throughput per megawatt defines production volume and cost per token defines efficiency.
That is way more visceral.
It is, and they need to highlight the extreme co-design mentioned in the source, like routing the heavy model computations to Rubin systems while Grok accelerators handle token generation. That physically illustrates what manufacturing intelligence actually looks like.
Let me push back on that for a second, though. If we frame it strictly as a manufacturing plant converting energy to tokens, do we risk losing the author's point about agentic AI?
How do you mean?
Well, a traditional factory pumps out identical static widgets, right? But agentic AI, like the OpenClaw or NemoClaw systems mentioned in the text, has to actually reason, use tools, and make dynamic decisions on the fly. Does leaning too heavily into the factory metaphor strip away the intelligence factor?
That's a fair question, but no, the factory metaphor actually enhances it if you blend it with the concept of agentic harnesses. The writer needs to explain that tokens aren't just outputs shipped to a screen. They are internal steps in a continuous reasoning process.
Oh, so the tokens are the raw physical material of cognition?
Precisely, an assembly line of thought. By showing how extreme co-design physically separates the heavy computation phase on Vera Rubin from the rapid token generation on Grok, the writer makes the abstract idea of an agentic harness feel incredibly real.
Wow, yeah, that shows why throughput per megawatt isn't just some greenwashing metric. It's literally the physical speed limit of artificial thought.
Exactly. If you can't move the energy fast enough, the agent literally cannot think fast enough.
Which brings us perfectly to the sheer physical constraints of building these systems, because it takes staggering amounts of raw material. And this brings up the final major section of the manuscript. The author tackles doomerism, regulation, and export controls.
The manuscript heavily emphasizes the technological triumphs of the AI build-out, but isolates and underexplores the severe geopolitical and supply chain fragilities that actively threaten this infrastructure.
Yeah, they just tacked it onto the very end as a distinct policy section.
Which is the core weakness here. By separating the politics from the technology in a siloed appendix, the draft fundamentally fails to show how these geopolitical constraints are direct physical threats to the energy and chips foundational layers we just talked about.
It treats the engineering like it exists in a vacuum.
Right, so the suggestion is to integrate the geopolitical constraints and physical supply chain vulnerabilities directly into the core technical analysis of the infrastructure build-out. Demonstrate that national security and hardware architecture are currently inseparable.
Give me some concrete examples of how to weave that in seamlessly.
Move the data point about NVIDIA's China market share dropping to 8% directly into the section discussing the global deployment of Blackwell and Vera Rubin. Don't just leave it at the end.
Good call.
And when detailing those insane 1.3 million component server racks, directly weave in the specific anxieties about the Middle Eastern helium supply and Taiwan stability.
Because every single component relies on that fragile supply chain.
Exactly. Furthermore, when the author discusses the push to reindustrialize America, explicitly connected to the CEO's argument that U.S. regulatory paranoia, doomerism, is an active national security risk. Show how treating AI heavily regulated and ceded to overseas competitors could cripple the adoption layer just as the hardware layer peaks.
Okay, but this brings up a huge debate. The text highlights Huang's outspoken AI optimism, right? Calling AI a superhuman tutor that will solve biology and climate science.
But is there a risk that blending his political commentary with the hardware specs makes the piece read too much like an op-ed?
It is a delicate editorial line to walk.
Right, because, I have a genuine disagreement with that level of optimism. It's super convenient to get frustrated at regulations and call doomers a national security risk when you are the one selling the infrastructure. Like, is his optimism really well-earned, or is it just business-driven?
Well, you have to look at the capabilities. The hardware is genuinely delivering on those biological simulations today. But for the writer's sake, they don't need to pick a side. They maintain analytical distance by reporting on the CEO's strategic worldview as a variable of friction coefficient in the supply chain, rather than endorsing it as absolute truth.
So treat the politics as a strict engineering variable.
Yes. If domestic regulation slows down AI adoption, then the massive capital expenditures for those 9 gigawatts of AI factories become economically unviable. The politics directly dictate the physics of the build-out.
That makes total sense. Hey, I want to throw this back to the audience for engagement moment number 2. Do you trust the vision of someone who profits enormously from AI's growth, or does that immense profit make his optimism less credible? Tell us your reasoning in the comments.
Definitely a polarizing topic.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's recap the core feedback for the writer here. We have 3 actionable steps to elevate this piece. First, structurally bridge the 2006 CUDA bet with the 2026 Cosmos 3 open model strategy to show that repeatable playbook of subsidizing software to lock in hardware. Second, ground the abstract generative computing shift using the physical economics of the AI factory, specifically contrasting legacy data centers with modern revenue-generating plants.
Right.
And third, weave the geopolitical and supply chain vulnerabilities directly into the infrastructure analysis, rather than siloing them at the end.
Integrating those elements will massively maximize the manuscript's overall impact.
Absolutely. We warmly invite you to submit your revised work back in again for more feedback. The CUDA bet reshaped tech once, and the next physical AI bet is absolutely poised to do it again. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments, and like and subscribe to NextGen AI Tech for more breakdowns of what's really happening in AI.